Montana Territory, 1875. The sun hung like a worn gold coin over Whitetail Valley, where the untamed wilderness met the first uncertain reaches of civilization. A valley where nature reigned supreme, where a man might still vanish without a trace, and where Quinn Daniels had convinced himself he preferred it that way. Quinn adjusted his worn Stetson as he guided his chestnut stallion along the ridge. At 25, he already carried the quiet confidence of a seasoned cowhand, though his face remained unlined save for the faint creases at the corners of his eyes from squinting against the western sun. His lean frame spoke of a life lived in the saddle, and the revolver at his hip told the rest of the story. This was a man who understood the language of survival. "Come on, Rusty," he murmured to his horse, patting the animal's muscled neck. "Let us get back before Harlow starts thinking we got ourselves ambushed." Below, the scattered buildings of Silver Creek came into view, hardly more than a whisper of civilization against the vast Montana wilderness. Quinn felt that familiar tension in his shoulders ease slightly. Not because Silver Creek was home, Quinn Daniels did not believe in homes, but because the small settlement offered temporary shelter, supplies, and occasionally work. Home meant attachment, attachment meant vulnerability, and vulnerability got men killed in the West. Quinn had learned that lesson watching his father die defending their homestead from raiders when he was just 14. His mother had followed 6 months later, her heart simply giving out from grief. Since then, Quinn had kept moving, taking work where he could find it, never staying long enough to form connections that could be severed. A man needs nothing but his horse, his gun, and enough sense to keep moving, his father's friend had told him after the burial. Quinn had built his life around those words. As he descended toward the settlement, Quinn caught sight of a commotion near the newly constructed train station. Silver Creek's recent connection to the railroad had brought a trickle of new faces to town, most passing through on their way to somewhere more substantial. But today's arrival seemed different. A small crowd had gathered as passengers disembarked from the afternoon train. Quinn might have ridden past without a second glance had the sunlight not caught something that stopped his heart mid-beat. She stood on the platform, her honey-blonde hair escaping in delicate tendrils from beneath a modest blue bonnet that matched the color of her traveling dress. Even from this distance, Quinn could see she carried herself with a quiet dignity that seemed at odds with the rough-hewn boards beneath her feet. She appeared to be about 20, her face showing both youthful beauty and a certain determination as she surveyed her new surroundings. Quinn reined Rusty to a halt without conscious thought. Something about the way she stood there, seemingly unafraid yet clearly out of place, stirred something in his chest he could not name. "She will not last a month," he muttered to himself, trying to dismiss the strange feeling. Women who came west either married quickly or left quicker. The frontier devoured the unprepared, especially those who arrived wearing city clothes and carrying what looked like books among their luggage. Yet he could not look away as she spoke with Station Master Hughes, who pointed toward town. She nodded, gathered her bags, and began walking with purpose toward Silver Creek proper. Quinn nudged Rusty forward before he realized what he was doing. Within moments he found himself riding alongside her. "Pardon me, miss," he said, tipping his hat. "Those bags look heavy." "Silver Creek is a fair walk from here." She looked up, startled, her eyes the deep blue of mountain lakes. For a moment she seemed to assess him, taking in his weather-worn clothing, his capable hands, the gentle way he handled his horse. "I appreciate your concern, sir, but I am quite capable," she replied, her voice carrying a hint of Eastern refinement, though there was steel beneath the politeness. "I do not doubt it," Quinn found himself saying with unexpected sincerity. "But hospitality demands I offer assistance. I am heading into town myself." She hesitated, then offered a smile that hit Quinn with physical force. "In that case I would be grateful. I am Zara Winters." "Quinn Daniels," he replied, dismounting in one fluid motion. "Please allow me." As he secured her bags to his saddle, Quinn felt strangely unsettled. Something about Zara Winters made him acutely aware of the dust on his clothes and the 3-day stubble on his jaw. He had not cared about such things in years. "What brings you to Silver Creek, Miss Winters?" "Most folks passing through tend to continue on to Helena or beyond." "I am not passing through, Mr. Daniels. I have accepted a position as the schoolteacher here." Quinn nearly missed a step. "Schoolteacher." "Silver Creek barely has enough children to warrant a school." 12 children currently," she replied confidently. "With 3 more families expected before winter, the town council decided it was time. They wrote that Silver Creek is growing and needs to prepare for its future." Quinn knew all about the town council's grand ambitions, most involving investments following the railroad's arrival, but a schoolteacher seemed particularly optimistic. "And you came all this way alone?" he asked, unable to hide his surprise, her chin lifted slightly. "My father died last winter. There was little left for me in Boston, and I have always believed that one should go where one is needed." The simple dignity in her words silenced Quinn. They walked in companionable quiet for several minutes before she spoke again. "And you, Mr. Daniels? Are you one of Silver Creek's permanent residents?" Quinn shook his head. "No, ma'am, I work cattle for the Harrison spread, just in town for supplies before heading back out tomorrow." "I see," she said, something like disappointment crossing her features briefly. "You are a true cowboy, then." The way she said it, not with the romantic idealization of Eastern novels, but with simple acknowledgement, made Quinn uncomfortably aware of himself. "Just a man trying to make his way," he corrected gently. As they approached the town's modest main street, Quinn found himself reluctant for their walk to end. There was something about Zara Winters that made the world seem less harsh, less empty. It unsettled him deeply. "The boarding house is just there," he said, pointing to a two-story building with white trim. "Mrs. Peterson runs it. She will see you settled." "Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Daniels," Zara said, reaching for her bags. Their hands brushed briefly as he passed them over, and Quinn felt an unexpected jolt. Her eyes met his, and for a moment neither moved. "Welcome to Silver Creek, Miss Winters," he finally managed, tipping his hat again before mounting Rusty. "I hope you find what you are looking for here." As he rode toward the general store, Quinn fought the urge to look back. Silver Creek's new schoolteacher was not his concern. He would be gone tomorrow, back to the isolated comfort of the range where attachments could not form and hearts could not break. Yet somehow he knew with unsettling certainty that those blue eyes would haunt his dreams tonight. Quinn told himself it was merely curiosity about a newcomer, nothing more. But deep inside, beneath layers of carefully constructed defenses, something long dormant had begun to stir. 2 months passed. The Montana summer was beginning to yield to autumn's first tentative advances when Quinn found himself riding back to Silver Creek. He had not planned to return so soon, but a string of circumstances, a broken wagon wheel that needed replacement parts, a letter requiring delivery to Mr. Harrison, had conspired to bring him back. He told himself he had not thought of Zara Winters more than a passing handful of times. He almost believed it. Silver Creek appeared much the same, though Quinn noticed new construction on the northern edge, a small building taking shape that had not been there before. As he passed, he realized with a start that it must be the schoolhouse. Without conscious decision, he found himself turning Rusty toward it, just to see the progress, he reasoned, nothing more. A small figure stood in the doorway of the half-finished structure, writing something in a small book. Even at a distance, Quinn recognized her immediately. She wore a simpler dress today, practical brown cotton with the sleeves rolled to her elbows, and her honey-blonde hair was tied back with a ribbon. He should have ridden on, instead he found himself approaching. "Afternoon, Miss Winters," he called, tipping his hat as she looked up. "I see the town made good on their promise of a school." Recognition lit her face, followed by a smile that made his chest tighten inexplicably. "Mr. Daniels," she replied, "what a pleasant surprise. Yes, construction began 3 weeks ago. We hope to have it completed before the first snow." Quinn dismounted, leading Rusty closer. "Where are you holding classes in the meantime?" "Mr. Henderson has kindly allowed us to use the back room of his mercantile in the mornings." She gestured to her book. "I am planning where everything will go." "Perhaps you might offer an opinion." Before Quinn could formulate a reason to decline, he found himself following her into the skeleton of the building. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the unfinished walls, creating golden patterns on the raw plank floor. "The desks will be arranged here," she explained, her voice animated with enthusiasm. "The blackboard there and my desk near the window where the light is best for grading." Quinn found himself captivated not by the plans but by the light in her eyes, the passion in her voice. He had never met anyone who spoke of the future with such certainty, such hope. "The children, how are they taking to their lessons?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Wonderfully, for the most part. Young Jamie Henderson struggles with his letters but has a remarkable mind for figures. The Miller twins could not read a word when I arrived but now recognize over 50. And little Sarah Beckett," she stopped suddenly, blushing slightly. "Forgive me, I tend to go on about my students." "No need for apologies," Quinn said, surprised to find he meant it. It is clear you care for them.
I do.
Every one of them deserves the chance to build a life beyond what they can currently imagine. She hesitated, then added more softly, "Is that not what the West is truly about, Mr. Daniels? The freedom to become more than what came before." The question struck uncomfortably close to thoughts Quinn typically avoided. "Some might say the West is about survival, Miss Winters, plain and simple."
Perhaps, she conceded.
"But mere survival seems a rather empty goal, does it not?" Quinn had no ready answer. For years, survival had been precisely his goal, moving from place to place, taking what work came, avoiding attachments that might lead to pain. Yet standing in this half-built schoolhouse with this remarkable woman, his carefully constructed philosophy felt suddenly inadequate. "How long will you be in town?" she asked, changing the subject. "Just overnight." "I have business at the Mercantile, then back to the Harrison spread tomorrow." Was that disappointment that flickered across her face? Surely not. "I see. Well, the children would enjoy meeting a real cowboy, should you have time to visit our class in the morning." Quinn started to form his refusal. He had no place in a schoolroom, had nothing to offer children, but instead heard himself say, what time would be suitable. The smile she gave him was worth the discomfort he felt at the prospect. 9 o'clock after arithmetic but before history, the perfect time for a special visitor. As Quinn left the schoolhouse, he tried to understand what had possessed him to accept her invitation. He had spent years perfecting the art of non-attachment, of passing through places without leaving traces or collecting memories. Yet here he was, promising to visit a schoolroom, all because Zara Winters had smiled at him. That night, as he lay in his rented room above the saloon, Quinn stared at the ceiling and confronted an uncomfortable truth. He had ridden into Silver Creek hoping to see her again, not by chance but by design. "This is madness," he muttered to the darkness. "She is a schoolteacher with dreams of building something. You are a drifter who avoids putting down roots." Yet when morning came, Quinn found himself standing outside Henderson's Mercantile at 5 minutes to 9, his hat in his hands and his heart beating uncommonly fast. The schoolroom visit changed something in Quinn. Watching Zara with her students, patient, kind, but also firm when needed, he saw not just a teacher but a woman building something meaningful from nothing. The children had peppered him with questions about cattle, horses, and life on the range. To his surprise, he had enjoyed answering them, especially when his responses earned approving smiles from their teacher. When the lesson ended, Zara had walked him to the door. "Thank you, Mr. Daniels, you have quite a way with children." "They are good kids," he had replied, uncomfortable with the praise. "You are doing fine work here." "I hope so," she said, her voice softening. "Sometimes I wonder if I have taken on too much. Silver Creek is different from what I expected."
How so?
She hesitated, harder in some ways, more resistant to change. Several parents still question the value of education, especially for their daughters. And there are practical challenges. Books are scarce, supplies expensive to ship. Quinn had nodded, understanding all too well the harshness of frontier realities. "The West tests everyone who comes here, Miss Winters. But if you will permit me to say so, you appear to be meeting that test admirably." The gratitude in her eyes had stayed with him long after he had ridden back to the Harrison ranch. In the weeks that followed, Quinn found himself inventing reasons to return to Silver Creek. A broken bridle that needed the leatherworker's attention, supplies that could not wait for the regular supply run. Messages that somehow required personal delivery. Each time he found his way to the schoolhouse, now nearly complete. Sometimes he would simply watch from a distance as Zara dismissed her students for the day, her face alight with satisfaction. Other times he found the courage to approach, offering to help with small tasks, hanging a shelf, repairing a loose floorboard, carrying water from the well. "You have become quite the regular visitor, Mr. Daniels," she observed one afternoon as they walked from the schoolhouse toward her boarding house. "I had gathered the impression you were not one to linger in town." "I find I have reason to visit more frequently of late," Quinn replied, then added more honestly than he intended, "I enjoy our conversations." "As do I." Her smile held warmth that made Quinn momentarily forget all the reasons he had spent years avoiding connection. "Perhaps," he ventured, "you might permit me to escort you to the harvest social next Saturday. The town has one each year before winter sets in." "I would like that very much," she replied, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. Quinn rode back to the Harrison ranch that evening with an unfamiliar lightness in his chest. Yet as the miles passed beneath Rusty's hooves, familiar doubts began to surface. What was he doing, forming an attachment to Silver Creek's schoolteacher? His life offered no stability, no future beyond the next season's work. Zara Winters deserved someone who could build alongside her, not a man whose first instinct at the first sign of trouble was to ride away. Still, when Saturday came, Quinn found himself wearing his one good shirt, his boots polished to a shine, riding towards Silver Creek with a nervousness he had not felt since he was a boy. The Harvest Social transformed the town's modest community hall. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting warm light over tables laden with food brought by every family in the area. A small band of local musicians played lively tunes in the corner, and children darted between the adults with the boundless energy of youth. When Quinn arrived at the boarding house to escort Zara, the sight of her momentarily robbed him of words. She wore a dress of deep green that complemented her eyes, her honey-blonde hair arranged in a style more elaborate than her usual practical braid. "You look beautiful, Miss Winters," he managed finally. "Thank you, Mr. Daniels," she replied, her eyes appraising his own efforts approvingly. "You look quite handsome yourself." The evening passed in a pleasant blur. They danced, somewhat awkwardly at first as Quinn had little practice, but soon with growing confidence. They sampled Mrs. Peterson's famous apple pie and Mr. Henderson's potent cider. Quinn found himself talking more than he had in years, telling Zara about his childhood in Missouri before his family had ventured west, about his dreams as a boy of having his own ranch someday. "You never pursued that dream?" she asked as they stepped outside for a moment of quiet beneath the star-filled sky. Quinn leaned against the railing of the hall's small porch. "Life has a way of changing directions on you out here. After my parents died, I just focused on surviving. Dreams seemed like luxury items I could no longer afford." She moved beside him, close enough that he could detect the faint scent of lavender. "Dreams are never luxuries, Quinn, they are necessities. Without them, we merely exist rather than live." It was the first time she had used his given name, and it affected him more than he wanted to admit. "And what of your dreams, Zara?" he asked softly. "Beyond this school." She gazed out at the darkened street, the scattered buildings of Silver Creek barely visible in the moonlight. "I dream of building something lasting, not just a school but a community where education is valued, where children grow up believing they can become anything." She paused. "And I dream of a home, of course. Not just a place to live, but somewhere filled with love and purpose." Her words created a painful longing in Quinn's chest. Home, love, purpose. Everything he had convinced himself he neither needed nor deserved. Before he could respond, a commotion from inside drew their attention. They returned to find one of the ranchers, Emmett Parsons, swaying drunkenly in the middle of the dance floor, his voice raised in anger. "We do not need fancy book learning turning our children soft," he was shouting, pointing an unsteady finger toward where Zara now stood. "This Eastern lady coming here with her ideas, filling their heads with nonsense when they should be learning practical skills." Quinn felt Zara stiffen beside him. Several townspeople were trying to calm Parsons, but the man was deep in his cups and determined to be heard. "My boy comes home talking about poetry and history when he should be learning to work the land," Parsons continued. "What good is knowing about dead kings when winter's coming? This is not Boston, lady. This is the frontier. Different rules here." Quinn stepped forward without thinking. "That is enough, Parsons. You have had too much to drink." The rancher's bloodshot eyes focused on him. "Daniels, since when do you care about schooling? You are a saddle tramp, not a man who puts down roots." The words hit with uncomfortable precision. Quinn felt the eyes of the room upon him, including Zara's. "Miss Winters deserves your respect," Quinn said evenly. "She has done nothing but try to help this community and its children." Parsons sneered. "And why are you suddenly her champion? Been warming her bed, have you?" The room went deadly quiet. Quinn felt a cold rage sweep through him. In his peripheral vision, he saw Zara's face pale. "Take that back," Quinn said, his voice dangerously soft. "Or what?" Parsons challenged. What happened next occurred with a speed that surprised even Quinn. His right fist connected with Parsons' jaw, sending the drunken rancher sprawling across a table of food before crashing to the floor. The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Then Sheriff Miller was there, helping the dazed Parsons to his feet. "I think you have said quite enough, Emmett," the sheriff said firmly. "Time for you to head home." He glanced at Quinn. "You too, Daniels." "Cool off." Quinn became aware of whispers spreading through the crowd, of eyes darting between him and Zara. He turned to find her watching him, her expression unreadable. "I apologize for disrupting the social," he said stiffly, acutely conscious of the damage he might have caused to her reputation. A schoolteacher needed to be above reproach. Association with a man who solved problems with his fists would not help her standing in the community. "I should go," he added, already backing toward the door. "Quinn," she began, but he was already moving out the door and into the darkness, shame and anger warring in his chest. He had just proven what he had always known: men like him did not belong in civilized society. Men like him brought only trouble to those they cared about. It was better to be alone, to keep moving, to avoid attachments that could only end in pain. By dawn, Quinn had convinced himself that the only honorable course was to leave Silver Creek behind for good, for Zara's sake, if not his own. Quinn was saddling Rusty the next morning when a voice stopped him. "Running away again, Daniels." He turned to find Sheriff Miller leaning against the stable doorway, his weathered face impassive. "I am not running away. My work at the Harrison Ranch is finished. Time to move on." The sheriff nodded slowly. "Convenient timing, right after you publicly defended our schoolteacher." "That has nothing to do with it. Does she know you are leaving?" The question hit Quinn like a physical blow. "It is better this way," he managed. "Parsons was right about one thing: I am not a man who puts down roots. Miss Winters deserves someone who can build alongside her." Sheriff Miller studied him for a long moment. "You know, for a man who has survived as long as you have out here, you can be remarkably foolish." Quinn bristled, meaning that running from happiness takes as much courage as facing down trouble. The sheriff straightened. "Parsons was drunk and talking nonsense. Nobody holds his words against Miss Winters. If anything, they respect her more for how she has handled it all with dignity." "And how I handled it? With violence." Miller's mouth quirked into a half-smile. "Most folks think Parsons had it coming, but that is not the point." His expression grew serious. "The point is that woman cares for you. Anyone with eyes can see it. And you care for her too, though you seem determined to deny yourself any chance at happiness." "You do not understand," Quinn said, turning back to his saddle. "My life does not have room for what loves family. A place to belong." The sheriff shook his head. "Those are not luxuries, son. They are what make life worth the trouble of living it." Quinn's hands stilled on the saddle strap. The sheriff's words echoed Zara's from the night before. "I saw how you looked at her last night," Miller continued more gently. "Like a man who has been lost his whole life and suddenly found his way home. I recognize that look because it is how I looked at my Martha before she passed." Quinn remained silent, unable to deny the truth in the sheriff's words. "At least say goodbye to her properly," Miller said, turning to leave. "She will be at the schoolhouse. She is always there early on Sundays, preparing for the week ahead." Long after the sheriff had gone, Quinn stood motionless beside his horse. Everything in him urged flight, the protective instinct honed by years of loss and hardship. Yet something stronger held him in place: the memory of Zara's smile, the feeling of her hand in his as they danced, the way she spoke of dreams as necessities rather than luxuries. With hands that were not quite steady, Quinn unsaddled Rusty. He would at least say goodbye properly. He owed her that much. The schoolhouse stood quiet in the early morning light, its construction now complete save for a final coat of paint. Quinn approached slowly, his boots crunching on the gravel path. Through the window, he could see Zara moving about inside, arranging books on the newly installed shelves. He knocked softly on the doorframe. She turned, surprise registering on her face, followed by something that might have been relief. "Quinn," she said, setting down the book she had been holding, "I was not certain I would see you again." "I came to say goodbye," he said, the words feeling like stones in his mouth. "I will be moving on today." "I see." Her expression grew carefully neutral. "Because of what happened last night." "Partly," he admitted, "but mostly because it is what I do. I do not stay in one place long. By necessity or by choice." The question caught him off guard, both, I suppose. Zara stepped closer, her blue eyes searching his face. "Sheriff Miller told me about your parents. About how you lost them both when you were young." Quinn stiffened. "The sheriff talks too much. Or perhaps too little has been said for too long," she countered gently. "You have been running ever since, have you not? Convinced that attachment only leads to pain. It is not that simple." "Isn't it?" She took another step closer. Quinn, what happened to your parents was tragic, but closing yourself off from connection, from love, that is a different kind of tragedy.
One you choose every day.
Her words penetrated defenses long maintained. What would you have me do? He asked hoarsely. I am a cowhand, I have no land, no home to offer. Nothing but the clothes on my back, and whatever I can earn by the sweat of my brow. I would have you stop running, she said simply. I would have you consider that perhaps there is something worth staying for.
Someone worth taking a chance on.
The hope in her eyes nearly undid him. Zara, you deserve better than a man like me. Should I not be the judge of what I deserve? She reached out, her hand lightly touching his arm. I came west seeking purpose, a place where I could make a difference. I found that, but I found something else too, something I was not looking for.
Quinn barely breathed. What was that?
A man with a good heart hidden behind walls built from loss. A man who treats children with kindness and respect. A man who defends those he cares about without hesitation. Her fingers tightened slightly on his arm.
A man I have grown to care for deeply.
Quinn looked down at her hand on his arm, then back to her face. I am afraid, he confessed quietly. Afraid that if I allow myself to feel everything I feel for you and then lose you somehow, I would not survive it. Oh, Quinn, she whispered, that fear is precisely what tells you how real this is. Love worth having always involves risk.
Love, he repeated, the word foreign on his tongue.
Yes, she said simply.
Love.
Quinn stood at the precipice of a choice more frightening than any he had faced on the frontier. To flee, as he had always done, or to stay and risk his heart completely. I do not know how to build a life in one place, he admitted. I only know how to keep moving. Then perhaps we could learn together, she suggested, hope brightening her eyes. Silver Creek needs more than just a school.
It needs people who believe in its future.
The future, Quinn had spent so long avoiding thoughts beyond the next season that the concept felt almost dangerous. Yet standing there in the schoolhouse Zara had fought to create, Quinn found himself imagining possibilities he had never allowed before. A small ranch of his own, perhaps, children running across a yard. Zara beside him year after year, building something lasting together. It was terrifying, and suddenly desperately necessary. If I were to stay, he said carefully, if I were to try to build something here, would you be patient with me? I may not be very good at it at first. Her smile bloomed like a desert flower after rain. I am a teacher, Quinn Daniels.
Patience is a professional requirement.
Quinn found himself smiling in return, the tension of years beginning to loosen its hold on his heart. Slowly, he reached out to take her hand. Then perhaps I could start by escorting you to church this morning, he suggested. And afterward, maybe we could discuss what building a future might look like, together.
Zara's hand tightened around his. I would like that very much.
As they walked from the schoolhouse into the clear Montana morning, Quinn felt something he had not experienced since childhood, the sense of walking toward something rather than away from it. The path ahead remained uncertain, filled with challenges he could only begin to imagine. But for the first time in years, he was no longer facing it alone.
Spring 1876.
The Montana landscape had transformed from winter's stark beauty to a canvas of green and wildflowers. Silver Creek had changed, 2 new buildings rose along the main street, more families had arrived with the warming weather, and the schoolhouse now sported a freshly painted sign and a small bell in a tower Quinn had built himself. Quinn stood on the newly constructed porch of his small ranch house, surveying the land he now owned. 5 months of saving every penny, of taking extra work breaking horses for neighboring ranches, of sleeping in the stable to avoid boarding costs, it had all culminated in 20 acres of good grazing land with a small stream running through it. Not much compared to the larger spreads, but it was his, a beginning. The house was modest, 2 rooms with a lean-to kitchen, but solid. Quinn had built it with his own hands and the help of friends he had somehow acquired in Silver Creek. Sheriff Miller, Reverend Thomas, even old Henderson from the Mercantile had shown up with supplies and labor when word spread that Quinn Daniels was putting down roots at last. The distant sound of hoofbeats drew his attention. Quinn smiled as he recognized the rider approaching his property, Zara, her blonde hair catching the afternoon sunlight as she guided her mare along the path from town. Their courtship over the winter months had been conducted with proper decorum, mindful of her position as the town's teacher. Sunday walks after church, chaperone dinners at the boarding house. Sleigh rides during the Christmas season with the Peterson children in tow as nominal chaperones. But with each passing week, something had grown between them, a certainty, a deepening trust, a love that neither could deny despite the vast differences in their backgrounds. Quinn stepped off the porch to meet her as she dismounted. "You are earlier than I expected," he said, taking the reins of her mare. School dismissed early. The children could hardly concentrate with the spring planting festival tomorrow. Her eyes took in the completed house with evident pleasure. "You have been busy. It looks wonderful, Quinn." "It is finished," he said simply. "Every nail, every board, every window in place." Understanding dawned in her eyes. They had agreed months ago that he would not formally court her until he had something real to offer, not just promises, but tangible proof of his commitment to staying. "Truly finished?" she asked softly. "Truly." He secured her horse to the hitching post, then offered his arm. "Would you like to see it, all of it?" She took his arm, her face alight with anticipation. "I would love to." Quinn led her through the small house, pointing out the features he had incorporated with her in mind. Bookshelves built into the wall of the main room, large windows to capture the natural light she loved, a small writing desk positioned to view the mountains in the distance. "It is perfect, Quinn," she said, running her hand along the smooth wood of the desk. "Absolutely perfect." "Not quite," he replied, his heart suddenly pounding. "There is one thing missing." "What is that?" Quinn took a deep breath, then reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object wrapped in a handkerchief. With fingers that trembled slightly, he unwrapped it to reveal a simple gold band set with a small sapphire. "You," he said simply, "this house needs you to make it a home." Zara's eyes widened, filling with tears as Quinn carefully knelt before her. "Zara Winters, you saw something in me I could not see in myself. You taught me that running from pain meant running from joy as well. You showed me that a life without connection is no life at all." His voice grew husky with emotion. "I love you. I want to build a future with you, not just this small ranch, but a life filled with purpose and love and perhaps, someday, children. Will you marry me?" Tears spilled down Zara's cheeks as she nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Then she found her voice. "Yes, Quinn, yes, I will marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Quinn felt the last of his old fears dissolve. The man who had once believed attachment only led to pain now understood a deeper truth, that love was worth every risk, every uncertainty the future might hold. They were married 2 weeks later in Silver Creek's small church, with what seemed like the entire town in attendance. Sheriff Miller stood as Quinn's best man, while Mrs. Peterson, who had become like a mother to Zara, gave the bride away. As they spoke their vows, Quinn looked into the blue eyes of the woman who had transformed his life and made a silent promise that he would spend every day building the home and family they both deserved, here in this small corner of the Montana Territory, where a drifting cowboy and an Eastern schoolteacher had found love neither had been looking for. When Quinn Daniels had first spotted Zara Winters stepping off the train in Silver Creek, something in him had recognized what he had spent years denying he needed. Now, as they walked out of the church as husband and wife to begin their life together, he understood that she had seen it too. The possibility of a love strong enough to heal the wounds of the past and brave enough to face whatever the future might bring.